Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have another layout that I made using the January Color Kitz collection from Shimmerz Paints. As usual, I'm starting off this mixed media layout with a piece of 12 by 12 inch, 120 pound gessoed paper. And what I'm doing right now is using the packaging technique to add some color in a triangle. To do this, I'm starting off with a Vibez called Snow Way Man. I'm using my favorite packaging technique and I'm spreading the color all around the left-hand side of the layout. And you can see that this triangle is pretty big, but it's going to grow even a little bit bigger as I move along and add more paint to the background. And I feel like I do that a lot. I'll add some color and then I'll just keep spreading it out more and more. So I add a number of layers of color and I ended up really loving the opaqueness of the colors. I usually am a little lighter handed with adding color to the background, but in the end, this color came out a little bit darker than I'm used to, and like I said, really opaque, and I really liked the way that looked, especially because I'm going to add some modeling paste to the background, so I really like the contrast between the deep color and the white modeling paste. But right now the color is still looking a little transparent, so I'm continuing to add paint all over this triangular area. And then I use my heat tool between each application, and that helps the color to build up and be a little bit denser. So now I'm adding a color called Hint of Mint, and this is a Spritz, and it truly is like a little hint of mint. It's like a light mint color. And I thought that it went together really nicely with the blue that's already on the background. So now you can see that I just started adding sprays of the Snowy Man to the background. I wanted there to be some lighter areas and darker areas, and I also wanted to make the majority of that area a little bit darker, as I mentioned earlier. Now I'm adding some splatters. I love to add splatters to my backgrounds. And you can see that I'm adding the blue splatters all over the area where I have the blue. But I'm mainly concentrating on adding them along the edge of the line of color. And the reason for that is I think that you could see the splatters really well there. So that's a good place for them to be visible. I think that the splatters along the edge of the color make that area look a little bit less of a straight edge or a hard line, and it makes it look a little bit more irregular, and that's the look that I was going for. I think that the edges look so much better when they're kind of fuzzy rather than when they're really straight. So I added splatters of both colors, the Snowy Man Vibez and also the Hint of Mint Spritz. And I don't include all the footage, but I included plenty of splatters of the Hint of Mint on my layout. And then as I was adding the splatters, I was thinking it would be nice to bring another color in. So I decided to bring in this Creameez called Power to the Purple. And I'm really glad that I did that because I think that that little bit of purple just helped to make the whole background come alive. Now, all of the colors that I've used today, they're all included in the January Color Kitz collection, but I was just looking on the Shimmerz website and it seems like the January kit is sold out, but you can still purchase all of these paints as single paints in the Shimmerz shop. And I thought that I should mention, if you place an order with Shimmerz Paints, please use my name in the comments because that way you will receive a free gift. So the Power to the Purple color, that's sitting there to the right of my layout, and it's a Creameez, so you have to add a little bit of water to activate it. So you could see that I am using the paint that's in the little pan, and then I spilled a little bit on my table. That I made use of that paint as well, but I was able to add quite a few purple splatters to the layout. And now I'm going to use this stencil to add a snowflake pattern to the background. So this is the stencil from the December kit, and I've been using it on all of my snow layouts ever since. I really love it. I love the shapes of all the snowflakes. I think they are very pretty. I also like the way the snowflakes are different sizes, and I love the way the snowflakes aren't in a pattern. I like the way they just look like they're scattered across the stencil. And so I use some modeling paste and I mix it together with some Crafter's Workshop Stardust Butter, and the color on that is Opalescent. And I also added some thick body white acrylic paint to make the modeling paste a little bit whiter. And I'm glad that I did that because I think that these snowflakes have a very nice crisp look. And as I said earlier, I like the way they contrast so nicely with the blue color that's in the background. And I thought that since the Stardust Butter has a lot of sparkle in it, that it would add some sparkle to this mixture. But I guess because I mixed it together with paint and modeling paste, the sparkles got kind of covered up by those things. If it's used by itself, it is rather sparkly, but I did want the snowflakes to be opaque. So they're not sparkly. If I had wanted them to be sparkly, I could have added some embossing powder before the modeling paste dried. I've done that in the past, and I think that makes a nice effect. But I really like the way the snowflakes looked on this layout, just the way they are, so I decided to just leave it, and it's okay that they're not sparkly. Now I'm going back into a couple of spots, and I'm adding a few more snowflakes just in areas that I thought needed a little something more. Of course, a lot of this is going to get covered up because this is going to be the area where I put my photos and a lot of embellishments, but you never know what's going to be showing and what's not going to be showing on a layout like this, or I don't anyway. So I figured I would just add a number of snowflakes in a lot of different areas. So now I'm using some watered down white acrylic paint, and I'm adding the splatters all over the background. Once again, mainly concentrating them in the area where I have the blue color. I love white splatters on so many layouts, but I feel like when it's a winter layout, it has to do with snow, you have to add lots of white splatters. And I think that the white splatters went along well with the snowflakes. So these are the two photos I'm going to use. These are of our dog, Coco. And I wasn't sure if I was going to share this, but unfortunately, Coco just passed away last week. It was very unexpected. She seemed to not be feeling great for a day or so, and then it seemed to accelerate. So we brought her to the vet at like 2 in the morning, and they gave her some antibiotics. They said she had a fever and that she should have a sonogram of her liver. But then unfortunately later that day, her liver ruptured, and so it was a very bad situation. And it's a little hard to talk about. It's very recent, it's very fresh, but we love Coco so much. She was somewhere around 10 or 11 years old. We had her for a little over 8 years, and it's just not the same in our house without her. We really miss her. And, if you've ever lost a pet, it's a really difficult thing. And yeah, we're just all kind of going through it at this point. But I think it's really nice that I thought her pictures came so awesome. I had all of my dogs outside. I was taking pictures of them. But I just love the way her eyes look so big and her nose looks a little bit bigger than it does in real life. But I just thought these were cute pictures with her big puppy dog eyes. So I'm glad that I took these pictures. We take a ridiculous amount of pictures of our dogs. So there's no shortage of photos. But I'm glad that I got a few pictures of her in the snow because she really loved the snow. She loved to just sit outside. She would lay down in the snow and just kind of watch what was going on around her. So, yeah. I'm going to stop talking about it because it's just too emotional, especially right now since it just happened. Now, I'm using 2 photos of Coco. They measure a little bit less than 3 by 4 inches. I mounted them on some white cardstock and then again on one of the purple pattern papers from the January collection. And now I'm using a number of the embellishments to surround the photos. I cut one of the embellishments in half. I put half on the left-hand side and half on the right-hand side on top of the photos. And then there was a little ephemera piece that had the snowman on it, so I tucked it underneath both of the photos. I added a little sentiment that said Frosty, and then there was a little banner that says Snow Happy, and I was using that, or I was going to use it on my first layout for the month, and I decided not to use it, but I love the way it looked on this layout, so I added that underneath the word Frosty. Now I'm creating a title cluster. I'm using the acrylic title Winter Memories that was included in the January kit. I love those acrylic titles. and I clustered some embellishments around it. I have the really beautiful snow globe embellishment. I kind of tucked that behind the title, and then I also included a purple heart to the right. I wanted there to be a little bit of purple in that cluster. And then underneath it, there's kind of a brush stroke that has some snowflakes on it, like some little light dots of snow. And so I put that underneath the title to kind of anchor it. There's a sentiment that says, let it snow. So I put that to the right-hand side of my photo cluster. I put some fun foam behind it to give it a little bit of dimension. And then because I'm going to be resting it a little bit on the right-hand photo, it was necessary to bump it up a little bit so that it would sit flat. I also included one of the dots between the two photos. I once again was going to use that dot on the other layout. I ended up using a different dot, but it worked perfectly on this layout because of the different color scheme that I have. And then I also added 3 turquoise hearts from the ephemera pack. I do switch up the hearts a little bit. I end up moving the heart that's on the lower left-hand corner of the photo up to where the smaller heart is. So I have 2 hearts together, and then I move the heart that's on the right-hand side down a little bit underneath the sentiment that says, let it snow. And you can see that on the final layout that's at the end of the video. So I loved this piece of pattern paper. So I used paper punches and circle cutters, and I cut out a number of these circles, and I'm going to use them as embellishments on my pages. You can see that I use my Creative Memories cutters. I used some tiny punches, and I was able to get some embellishments in a number of different sizes, and I think they made a nice addition to the page. And I almost forgot to mention that I added a little penguin to the left-hand side of the photos. I love that little penguin. It looks like it's kind of peeking out from behind the photos. But now I'm adding those little circles. And if you look really carefully at the medium and larger size ones, they're images of teeny tiny little snowflakes, like tons and tons of them. And I just thought that they were very pretty. So you can see that I'm spreading them out around the layout. The smaller ones are just one little snowflake. I think it's a snowflake. It's a little burst of some kind. And so I wanted to include some of the small ones too. I always like to have a variety of sizes of embellishments that I use on my layout, or maybe not always, but I do think that's a bonus when you can find an embellishment that you want to add a lot of in a number of different sizes. And then I used my ATG adhesive to attach down a couple of them, and then decided that I probably wanted to ink the edges of them. So I used some Distress Oxide and I inked up the edges. That creates a little bit more contrast between the embellishment and the background, and I think it gives a nice finished edge to embellishments. So I use inks a lot to ink the edges of ephemera pieces and things that I've fussy cut out. And at first I wasn't sure if I was covering up too much of the background. I really love the background. I really love the way the paints look and the modeling paste, but I really liked these embellishments as well. But I think that in the end, they added a really nice element to the layout, although I don't think that I had to add them. Now I'm going to attach down the acrylic title. For most of my wet glue needs, I like to use Aleene's gel glue, but I know that that won't work on something that's plastic like this, so instead I'm using Glossy Accents. I know there are a lot of different adhesives, but I find that Glossy Accents works really well for things like plastic and jewels. So I tried that out and it worked out really well, and it adhered the title to the background very well. Oh, I love finishing off layouts with jewels. I guess they're not absolutely necessary, but they're something that I like to add as a finishing touch. I use 2 different kinds of, I guess you would call them jewels on this layout. The larger ones, you can see them to the left of my mat. Those are from Hobby Lobby. I bought those a very long time ago, probably on sale, and I'm using the smaller ones. And I'm placing those on the smaller circles that I've added to the background. And then for the larger circles, I put a number of these little tiny gems that I have. I've had them in my stash for years. They come in strips, they're self-adhesive, and I cut them apart. And you can see that I have quite a few of those on each of those circles. And these little gems stick really well, which is great because I really dislike when I take a look in my albums and some of the jewels and embellishments have fallen off the layout and they're stuck in the bottom of the page protector. But because I didn't feel as confident that those iridescent, slightly larger dots were going to stay put, I did go back later on and use some glossy accents to attach all of those down, just for a little bit of insurance. So I put some of those iridescent dots on the blue hearts, but it turned out that I didn't really like those. I thought it was a little bit too much overkill. I didn't think that it was necessary to have those on there, so I ended up taking those off. And I'm almost done, but I was thinking that I wanted to add just a few more of those smallest circles to the layout. So I once again punched them out, and then I found a couple of spots where I thought that I needed a little bit of something additional. So I added one to that spot where the triangle kind of points, and then I also added one to the title cluster. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for sticking with me, everybody. I really appreciate it. If you check out the description box, you'll find a link to the Shimmer shop. And if you're interested in getting a subscription to the Color Kitz collection, you'll find the link there too. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.